sort of being in relationship with what's going on in the room doesn't mean that I'm sitting down and saying, hi, nice to meet you. My name is, and what are you into? Like, we're not having that kind of a back and forth exchange, but we are over the course of the offering the numbers and receiving the bids. I'm having to tune into what's going on. So it's my job to kind of establish that relationship and teach the room, I'm going to sell it quick, or I'm always going to stay a little bit longer at the end and let you think about it.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about solving big problems and making an impact, and talking with accents and knowing the combination to the secret gate. That's about all you're going to get out of me. And while we're talking in public, if we're in private, I might be convinced that I might tell you the combination, but you still don't know where that gate is, do you?
No.
That's you know where the gate is, boy. Don't you?
I know exactly where it is, but I can't talk about that right now.
Oh, that's right. We don't talk about it.
You trying to trick me, Dia? You see that?
I want to know where it is, and I want the code. Like that. Yeah.
This is like Fight Club.
I want to end up somewhere chopping wood, feeding the chickens. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there ain't no chickens on this one, but there is cows. And other animals, and it's nice to. I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, it ain't that far away, and the truck's in the garage, and it definitely has enough fuel in it to get there. Maybe. Then I was like, no, I gotta be here because we're going to talk with our friend Dia Bondi.
You'll be all right.
Yeah, well, I'll make it through it.
I think you will.
And I'm here just for you, Dia, because
there we go.
I am excited about. I've always been fascinated with the auction, the live auctions, and the auctioneer. And y'all know I don't talk like an auctioneer. I don't think I could ever get my volume or my speed. My rate of words up to that. But Dia, you seem to have a natural gift for that speed of words coming out of your mouth.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a little bit of an illusion. So for folks who are listening, I'm a West Coast girl. I've been doing leadership communications coaching in tech for years, and I went to auctioneering school for fun and realized that what I thought for years was fast talking at an auction is actually just a little bit of a manipulation about where the breath shows up. And so it's not as fast as you might think.
Oh, we're getting a little trade secrets here.
A little bit.
So are they actually saying words?
Yeah. And they're using fillers in between. So it's, they might, when they develop a chant, these auctioneers, they might say the words, but in between the words, just add a little filler consonant, so it sounds like it's an art. I can tell you that. I never had to develop a chant because I mostly do fundraising galas. I'm not at a cattle auction. I'm not in the world of livestock. I'm in the world of fundraising, and half the people in my audiences, they go to one auction in a lifetime. And, if I were using a full chant, they'd be raising their paddle in the air, not knowing what they were buying or what they were paying.
But you'd raise a lot of money for that nonprofit.
I certainly would.
So I would love, since you were saying it's like, not doing the full catalog, didn't find that exact voice. What did you learn about that? Because I feel like it is a very specific type of communication. There's some subtleties there you already kind of hinted at that you can use in other settings. Could you talk a little bit about that?
In auctioneering?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're basically learning to sell something in a minute and a half. Like, that's it. So it's a very condensed moment where a relationship gets quickly established. We agree on sort of how this is going to go, either implicitly or explicitly, sometimes very explicitly. We say the rules, like, I'm the auctioneer. I get to reopen the bids. If I miss your paddle, I get to reopen we kind of declare the rules, and then we're off. And in a minute, we've opened the bid, had an exchange, and closed it. And I learned, in auctioneering school, I just learned what needs to happen in that minute. But as you may or may not know, when I got back to the Bay Area, I started doing fundraising auctioneering as an impact hobby, and took that the tools that I learned and what I learned using those tools in that 1 minute, and extrapolated it out to how we can think about making asks in our businesses and our leadership and in our lives. So it's still numbers. It's still making the request. It's still dealing with answers you get. It's just how all of those happen is a mix of, the world of auctioneering and the world of fundraising, or, whatever folks listening have to do to get where they're going using a strategic ask.
What you just caught me off guard with was the fact that you're establishing a relationship. I've never been in a live auction like that. So, a couple of fundraiser ones that are fun, right?
Sure.
But never, like you said, the high dollar, we're going bang, 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 or cattle or sheep or whatever. Explain to us how you are developing a relationship with somebody in that speed. And then take it into the
Can I ask a prerequisite to that?
Yeah.
Can I ask a prerequisite? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big word. I had my coffee today. No, but because why do you need the relationship there? Because normally, when we're selling, that's something people talk about a lot. In an auction, I would guess you don't need it as much. It's built for a lack of relationship, would be my guess there. So I'd love if we could start a little bit on that. Of why do you need that relationship in the first place?
That's great. So, look, it is true. This is what I was saying, that like in auctioneer, when I learned to auctioneer, it was literally like open the bid at this number, follow these increments, get the paddles, name the winner, close it, and move on. Make a courageous decision about when it's over. Like, I remember our coaches in the back of the room being like, sell the damn thing, Dia. Just like say sold already. Like, you don't have any more paddles in the air. So knowing, sort of being in relationship with what's going on in the room doesn't mean that I'm sitting down and saying, hi, nice to meet you. My name is, and what are you into? Like, we're not having that kind of a back and forth exchange, but we are, over the course of the offering the numbers and receiving the bids, I'm having to tune into what's going on. So it's my job to kind of establish that relationship and teach the room, I'm going to sell it quick. Or I'm always going to stay a little bit longer at the end and let you think about it. So I'm establishing relationship while I'm kind of establishing the rules through demonstration. Now, out in the world of fundraising auctioneering, and out in the world of fundraising, like I do with founders, and look, sometimes when I work with executives in my leadership communications work, they're not fundraising, but they certainly are, fundraising from the perspective of like, we're establishing a new partnership that's going to be worth $100 million in our business. Like they're adding value to their business, just doing it not by selling, an item at auction, but by engaging a partner in something meaningful. So we need to establish that relationship really quickly, because that rapport is useful when the asks that you make don't go the way you expect. It can establish status in the relationship very quickly. Like you have status, I have status, together we're going to hold each other's status really high. And out in the real world, not related to auctioneering, it's quite obvious. We need to establish that relationship as the foundation for the conversations we're going to have after the requests we make. Now, when I'm doing fundraising auctioneering, sometimes it's sort of a misnomer, because sometimes in a fundraising scenario, we're not actually selling anything at all. Sometimes I'm selling art or a vacation, trip to Italy, VIP tickets to your favorite basketball, private suite, whatever. But sometimes I'm just standing in front of the room and making a request. You've got to, put your paddle in the air and give us $10,000, $20,000, $40,000, $10,000, $100, whatever it is. But the relationship building in the front end helps me establish we're here to do the same thing. We're here to establish that, like, we're here to participate in a collective, cooperative act of radical generosity to support this nonprofit that we're here to say yes to. Now, in business relationships, and I'll shut up, I promise. Well, not totally, but just for a minute.
Well, you're almost reading my mind on
in business relationships. In business relationships, it's important that relationship right off the bat helps us establish we're here to do the same thing, make one another successful.
So you didn't get it. So, because here was where I was going, or I was thinking is.
Did he just say I didn't get it?
No.
You didn't get it. You didn't read his
get
mind.
What I was thinking.
Let's hear it.
All right.
I can't wait to
say, I don't know either.
Here it is. So how is this communication, and I love the idea of the status also, because I got to follow on for that too. But how does that help you in the sense of when we're in the bit back to the business and you're identifying the client's problem? How does that help you solidify that and communicate that back to them, that understanding?
Understanding their problem?
Yeah, understanding the client's problem, because you're bringing a solution, right? So you hear a client and they say that they're talking and they're describing, and you hear the problem that your widget, your solution, your product solves. How does this communication technique help you restate that problem for your client to validate that you hear what they're saying?
Okay, so we have to go back if we're going to answer that question a little bit. Yeah. So we haven't talked very much about. We haven't talked really yet much about some of the core frameworks you can use to do exactly that, to do that reflecting back. Mm-hmm. But I have two frameworks that I work with a lot of leaders to help them do that. And I'll share them in just a sec. Folks who are listening, you might want to, bookmark this or grab a pencil or whatever, pull out your phone and take notes, because I'm going to give you the storytelling framework. So it's really important to recognize that when you're doing that reflection back to the room, and even in auctioneering, when I step in front of the room, I'll say to them what we're here to do. They know what they're there to do, but I say it to them anyway, and sometimes reframe it or add to it or paint a more technicolor picture or use language that reflects the way in which they want to see themselves. Okay. The point of that reflection isn't to tell them something new. Okay. So that they see your idea. It's so that they feel seen by you. You might not be telling them something wholesale new. You just might be layering onto it something that they're experiencing, but giving language to it in a new way that makes them go, exactly. I feel so seen, So here's the framework. I was giving you a heads up. I have two of them. For folks listening who are maybe advancing their own individual careers, maybe they're, solo practitioners, maybe they're experts and they're a team of one. This next framework tends to be the most useful. And I've used this to help countless people in my practice secure hundreds of millions of dollars in resources and decisions. And it's called the mirror effect. And it goes like this. I see you. You see me, and because of that. I see you, you see me, and because of that. Now, those aren't the words you're using, but this is the framework, the conceptual framework. I see you is like, hey, I see what you're trying to do here. I see how you operate in your values. I see the way that you lead your teams. I see how your product is evolving. I see the struggles that you're facing right now. I see that you like to be seen as a leader in your industry, or I like to see that, you want to, you're in a place where you have a great tension by wanting to be perceived as a leader, but also feeling like you have to mitigate risk before you can move. So you're speaking to different dimensions of their business or their situation. And again, you're not necessarily adding new information, but new language that makes them nod their heads. That's I see you. Mm-hmm. And when they're like, yes, or they're like, no, actually not quite, you can be like, great, help me understand. So you got to be willing to be a little bit wrong. Okay. And that that's not quite right. How would you say it? So that's, these were my words. How might you say it? And you're going to be gathering a lot of trust, establishing that relationship Camden I talked about earlier. You're going to be, elevating their status so they don't feel talked at because you're letting them correct you without you being heard about it. And you're going to get to hear the way in which they perceive the world based on the language they share to you. Okay, so that's I see you. Then we're going to go into you see me. You can be like, great. Here's what I'm up to. Here's what I care about. Here's how I help my clients address, that tension of wanting to be perceived as a leader, but needing to really mitigate risk so they can get unstuck. Here's the mission that I live by all the time. Here are my core operating principles. Here's the values I use as my guiding lights. Not all of those things, everyone listening, but you pick from those that feel relevant based on the intersection of what they're up to and they care about and what you're up to and what you care about. So they can start to see where those two things overlap. They can see that you're sharing some world in a way that's additive. You're adding to their world, but there's overlap. And then the third part is, and because of that, which is to say, and because of what you're up to and what I'm up to, here's my request. Here's my proposal. Here's what I think the next step is. Hear that?
No.
So now we're having a shared reality that shows why I'm the one, because I see you and you've had an opportunity to see me. And because of where those two things intersect, here's our next step together. Does that help, Otis?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's awesome for explaining that. Because the next thing that was coming to my mind is we get to that point, and now you mentioned earlier about status, and we get into the negotiation. How does that status? Because when you're an auctioneer, it's very obvious your status. You're generally you're commanding the room, right? You're the one in charge. How do you translate that status to the business in that sense?
Well, okay. So this will draw a little bit on the idea of status isn't like I'm higher than you in my job role, et cetera. It's about elevating your social status in that moment in the conversation you're in. And the way we can do that is to understand what your default status is. Are you warm and approachable, as like your default? And does that actually makes you very friendly and people want to work with you and like that, but also means that it kind of limits your authority in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the attributes of a lower status might be, very smiley face and a lot of you can see even how I'm sitting here, like this is a little lower status. I'm kind of crooked to you. I'm using a lot of gestures. I'm moving kind of quickly. I'm very friendly and approachable. Where you can elevate your status is by slowing things down, taking your time, and being willing to kind of create a little bit of formality and distance while also maintaining a sense of connection with the room. So I was just yesterday actually helping somebody edit this is not a interrelationship like spoken moment, but it was the beginning of a negotiation. The ask isn't coming yet. We're establishing status. And I was helping them write an email that had a paragraph in the front end that was about like, hey, I know I can offer you so much value in this way. I'm confident in my ability to bring leadership. Do you hear this? And now we're like, please, sir, can I have some more? So don't tell me don't explain to me how you're going to bring value. Just bring the value. And that will elevate your status. Does that make sense?
I'm curious, talking about 100%. Talking about status, there's one thing that comes to mind because there's all sorts of different pieces on it, but one thing that comes to mind is the like status drop a little bit of this, like I get on a phone call and say, hey, by the way, I'm just stepping out of the gym, I'm doing this, and kind of like bring you into reality more, so that they're not thinking you're some big executive that they can't talk to, those kind of things, right? It makes it much more personable.
Yep.
Then talking about establishing status and like maybe like raising it versus dropping it, is there any logic to that being confusing to the person? Like if you're kind of up and down too much, does that become like, oh, this person's fake, it's not genuine? Like because what little bit devil's advocate there, but yeah, go ahead.
Two things. As a powerful communicator, you want to understand that you can expand your range without not being you. Okay? We show up at our grandmother's funeral, we're going to show up a little differently than we show up at game night. It's still us. Okay. So leaders need to understand that because they might be expanding their range and showing up practicing showing up differently in different contexts doesn't mean it's not them. It just feels unfamiliar. So this is talking about not the person receiving, the relationship establishing, but the person doing the establishing. So that's number one. We have to recognize that. 2, context is everything. The context dictates the way in which we need to show up such that we can establish the right level of rapport and approachability combined with authority such that we can advance whatever it is that we're here to work on. I can be jamming out in the back room with my colleagues about a proposal I'm going to write, okay? Or even with a client. So I have clients in my world who are also advocates for me inside of their organizations. We can be jamming out very informally, but then when we show up with the executive team to pitch an idea, to talk about an initiative we're going to work on together, we are together now showing up differently, a little more formal. Mm-hmm. We understand that. So people that we might be showing up differently in different contexts also understand the context dictates, the range with which you show up in these different contexts. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the same context too, so they're naturally reading into
100%. And look, so what folks don't know is that I helped. I've worked a bunch in the Olympic movement, and I helped Rio de Janeiro win the right to host the Olympics, and worked on Turkey's bid for 2020 and other scenarios that are very protocol driven. It's a super duper formal environment. The bidding. Like the way campaigns are run are very different now. I mean, this is a fair bit of time ago, but I work with my clients there where, again, behind closed doors where it can be very formal. And then when we have to step in front of the IOC or we have to in front of a decision-making body, game on in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you had one there. The thing I want to drill into a bit, and you touched on this a little bit ago, is talking about the reflection process and, the making sure they understand that you see them as they are, understand their problem, those kind of things, their pain points. The thing that I think is kind of funny, especially in like the leadership space, consulting space, is that everyone's problem is special. And I want to know how you navigate that. Because there's this thing, like, even like that, we could take like back pain as an example. I'm in a bit of a bad back right now, so it's topical for free. But it's like something like 30% of Americans have a bad back. I'm not special. That being said, my back pain is very special. And you as the doctor need to make sure that I feel special. These kind of weird things where the problem's not necessarily special. It's not special, but I need to feel special. Could you talk some about how that plays into that reflection process? Because I think that's a fine line to walk.
I think you just nailed it, Camden.
Perfect.
I mean, just the recognition that because, look, I've been doing leadership communications work for 22 years. You think your situation is special? Absolutely not. But it's my job to make you feel such that I understand that you are in it and it feels special and unique to you. While at the same time recognizing that they're not alone, to also establish enough trust to say like, hey, I see what you're up to. Let me use language that you can say, yes, oh my gosh. And that I can bring a set of experiences or a narrative to the table that makes them feel like, wow, this feels unique and special, but I see she's seen this a million times. And so actually she might have some answers for me without making it feel like I'm diminishing the importance of the experience we're having right now. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
It's you're special, but you're not that special. You're special, but you're not that unique. And so I have some things I can offer you. You're special, but you're not alone. Now, I'll say that like all what we're talking about, the things that we're kind of dancing around here is that all of these communications moments are what I think of as clutch moments. Moments where you have to be clutch. You're making a big ask. You're establishing rapport. You're pitching an idea. You're saying a number. You're closing a deal. You're, securing a partnership, whatever they might be. And you need to be clutch in those moments. And I have in the 10,000 hours I've done, this work. And there are like 6 attributes to real clutch communicators in enterprise level executive roles, founders who are going out and fundraising, or individual experts who need to like lock in a deal. And if you're curious, I can share those with you and your audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, don't just give us a teaser. Tell us what the answer is.
You think I wasn't going to give it to you, Otis?
Oh, I knew you would, but you wanted me to ask you to make you feel better.
Exactly.
Working on our communication skills here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, the thing that we've been talking about here a lot is like the recognition that we have to, most of the really clutch communicators I work with are willing to be big in big moments. In the ICU, you see me example, that's a moment for you to say the more courageous thing, say the less obvious thing that feels much bigger and important and maybe a little less safe, because again, you could risk being wrong. And showing up big doesn't mean showing up demonstrative or over the top or entertaining or like a big personality.
It's not to kick the door in and go, I'm here, solving all the problems. We all know those guys.
Exactly. It's much more about making the decision to ask the more powerful question, making the choice to draw on a more compelling story as a way to illustrate a particular point. It's the decision to make the bigger request of the room. See that? Mm-hmm. So that's one attribute. And speaking of requests of the room, another attribute is that folks know they're good at designing a strategic ask. They know who to ask, when to ask it, and what to ask for. And they're not lowballing themselves ever. Okay? Doesn't mean that's easy, but they're making, they're really good at the who, what, and, when to make the ask. That's the second attribute. The third one is that they really know their voice, meaning they understand, and this might be your world, they understand what their core leadership principles are, what their operating principles, their leadership philosophy, and they have it at the tip of their tongue so they can draw on it when they need to. Many leaders I work with, they do have a leadership philosophy, they do have operating principles, but they're so innate, they don't realize that they can actually name them and claim them and put a narrative to them.
With the
risky... I was holding because that was only 3.
Yeah, I got 3 more, but go ahead, Cam.
Sorry. No, I was going to ask. I lost count there. Counting's not my strong suit, y'all. But the thing I was going to ask was talking about like the risky question and like playing with the risk there. Is that an element of like being more personable, that you're like willing to do the risky thing, or is it more so just to get you outside of that box to where you're more memorable? It's something that they haven't heard before. Those kind of things there. Which one do you see with that?
I mean, I'm not totally clear on what you mean on the first example. Can you say that one again for me?
Like more so if I say a risky thing to you, you're like, oh, Camden trusts me. He likes me. It's like by going outside of that box, I'm showing that I'm more personable with you and I'm willing to risk.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that you're showing that you're willing to be, you are being more personable. In some cases, the more courageous question is actually not the one that creates approachability and being personal. It actually creates distance. It creates it's a bombshell in the room. So it's about impact. Like, what impact are you trying to have? What outcome are you trying to create? And if you know what that impact is, and you're willing to be big in big moments, you're going to be asking the more courageous question that has more of the impact you're trying to have. So you're more likely to create the outcome that you came to create.
Okay. Makes sense. Let's get back to number 4 then.
So the second 3 are about having killer setups. I shared one with you today, but like being willing to slow the story down and really paint a picture to create killer setups, even if they're brief but powerful. Like, have killer setups for sharing, the idea you have for a new initiative, a killer setup for the request you're about to make, the killer setup for the proposal that you want to have, whether it's in your one-on-one, with your boss, or if you're sitting down with a strategic partner and talking about the way forward together. Killer setups, man. And then 4 is they bridge really nicely. And by bridging, what I mean is like a lot of founders and leaders I work with start to recognize, and our job to work together is to recognize that you are actually not your venture. You are not your venture. You have a distinct voice that you lend to your venture. So that ties back to like knowing your voice, but then also doing a really wonderful job of bridging to it, which means bridging your venture to your own voice means being able to not just talk about the data, but to help interpret it in a way that is through your leadership voice and your leadership eyes, is to be able to make it clear not just what the business is doing, but why you as a leader are the one to make it happen or to work with the team that makes it happen. So there's a little uncoupling there of like what the business is up to and what you as a leader are up to help that business be successful, even if you're the owner of it. And then the sixth one is really simple, but it's about, clutch leadership communicators prep like a pro. They just do. And that means they don't talk about what they're going to do. So in this meeting, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by talking about what they're up to and what their own values are. Then they don't talk about it. They don't tell me what they're going to do. They do it as if they're in the room. And great prep builds great confidence. It helps uncover, how killer or lack of killerness your setup is. It makes clear whether your leadership voice is coming through. It helps reveal whether your strategic ask is working or not. Like, so you don't talk about what you're going to do, you do it.
I'm laughing because what was popping into my head is the old Army way of teaching. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. And I'm glad you clarified that because, that's a technique, but I wouldn't recommend it outside of the military for use.
It is good for an exercise in memorization, not great to really hammer that stuff home, actually,
Yeah. I would love to know what was, because we were joking, well, not joking, you were telling us, the little girl with the concrete boots and the sweeping wet concrete. How did you go from sweeping wet concrete to executive leadership communication?
Yeah, so
I know that's really broad lifespan there, but
yeah, he just called me old. So I'm just kidding.
Hey, look, I can call anybody old at this point.
No, it's true. It is a long. Like I'm happy to say my age. I'm 51 years old, and I was sweeping exposed aggregate concrete when I was like 17. So it has been a while. So for folks listening, we were chatting before we pushed record that I grew up my dad owned a construction company, and he did flat work or concrete work, both for like big custom homes, but also for like developments. He'd pour out whatever 15 driveways and curbs and sidewalks and stoops in a day. And in my summers, I got to go to the lumberyard, got to drive the 1 ton and pick out, not supposed to pick through the wood pile, but I'd pick the 2x4s that he needed for setting forms and drive him to the job site. And when the truck is coming, listen to all the guys go, "The truck is coming!" And then after the pour out, I'd have to like broom the concrete under the blazing sun. Sandy, my dad's foreman, was hosing it down. So, my reality as a kid growing up was very work oriented. That kind of work. I mean, the expectation was that I was a good student too, but work mattered. And I was always very entrepreneurial, I think, in and around that. My whole family were not entrepreneurs in the way that I think of them today now. I work a lot. I'm in and around the Silicon Valley culture, so entrepreneur means a very specific thing. Today it means generative AI. But at that time, entrepreneurship looked like small insurance companies. My aunt owned a ballet studio. It was a bunch of small business owners. Like that's what, my family was. And
so it was just a culture of that sitting around the table at Thanksgiving then, huh?
Yeah. I mean, mostly like yelling at concrete trucks at 4:00 in the morning was more like it. But yes, sure. Thanksgiving table. Great.
However you want to picture it then.
Yeah. Like, do you, Otis, do you? But I was always very kind of self-determined that way. And so all the way through college, I stood up. summer dance camps for kids. And I was just very entrepreneurial in my little community and self-determined. And I ended up being in and around the fitness space because I could go teach a group fitness class. And at that time, in the 90s, I made $50 or $75 an hour. And it was so much fun. And I was a 1099 for folks who are listening internationally. A 1099 means you're not employed by the people who you're working with. They pay you as like a flat fee contractor. And that was great because I got to work for all the gyms in my county, all over the place on my schedule. I was just, I didn't have a boss. I've been bossless since the beginning. And I really realized that what I loved so much about being in the fitness space with folks was that they'd show up to my class not having lifted a weight or put on a pair of, some spandex in 20 years since middle school, and coming off of recovering from heart attacks or coming back from babies or whatever it was, and they would show up shy, and feeling intimidated at the idea of doing crunches in front of other adults. And over the course of time working with them, so many people would just come out of their own shells. They start by being in the back of the class, and 6 months into it, they're at the front of the class with me. And it was just really lovely to see people really, this is sort of a woo-woo word, but very embodied, very much like, I'm here, I'm doing this, let's go. And so when I went to college, after college, I realized, Otis, you asked me a big question. Now I've got a big answer for you.
That's all right.
But it just goes to show that like people's paths, you think that it's always up and to the right, and it's just not, know? Mm-hmm. And after college, I was an international economics major. I was out interviewing with like the World Bank and other places where I really felt like I can't sit in a cubicle and monitor bank consolidations and work my way up a ladder. It's just like, it's not what I can do. I couldn't have my promotion trajectory be in the hands of a matrix that somebody else built. And I know that's a massive simplification. I understand that, but that's how it felt to me. And so I went on a. That's
a big realization though in the entrepreneur journey, because when you go to college, I mean, the education system, without going down that rabbit hole, but the whole education system is to teach you to be a good employee, to include college.
I'm a terrible employee.
I always remember having a professor in ag biz talking about, my job isn't to make you a manager for a farm. My job is to teach you enough to go get taught by someone else how to be a manager. It's like, what the hell are we talking about here?
I remember really clearly. So I've just this year sent my son to college. He's in the mechanical engineering program at a great program in California. And I remember we were doing campus tours, and there was a woman who was a student, awesome woman, just like she was doing like med tech, robotics, bioengineering, like just awesome, this woman. And she was giving us the tour, and she was graduating and had already secured a job at, Johnson & Johnson or one of the big ones, and was kind of like, it's so great, our job placement rate. And I raised my hand and said, because I'm in and around so many entrepreneurs, I was like, okay, that's great, but do you have any accelerators on campus? Like, what is the infrastructure to help thinking about engineering folks leaving this campus and owning their own patents, building things, that to be sort of in charge of their own destiny in that way. And that's not to say that people who build a career in-house aren't in charge of their own destiny. I know a lot of people who are like, I have a picture of where I want to be, and they go there inside the system. And it was like, the woman was like, oh yeah. And she had to kind of like get her thoughts back together. And so I was always on that side of the world, like, and entrepreneurship wasn't the word to then as it is today. When I asked that question, the woman knew what I was talking about. When I was in college, like people were like, entrepreneurship, what is that? It was much more
French.
100%. Google wasn't a thing. The internet was barely a thing. Yeah. So I after I graduated and I was taking all these interviews, and it wasn't a realization, Otis. It was like sitting in an interview and going, I can't do, like a feeling in my body like, oh wow, if I do this, if I get a job like this, while it feels fancy to say that I take the ferry into the city every day and I wear a suit and all that, that's really dating me because people don't, hardly do that in the West Coast anymore. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew my body wouldn't let me do it. I would freak out, So it was more like a message I received than a decision I made, And then I went on a mission to go like, how do I get the same quality of experience and the same transformation I was doing at this very basic level with people in the fitness world, but in the world of business, because I saw myself, in a business world. And I learned about something called training and development, and which now is professional development, and found somebody who was my mentor. And I made the biggest strategic ask of him I have in my life. And those asks made it possible for me to learn this work and travel all over the world. I mean, I've taught in Hong Kong and the UK and Southeast Asia and, mainland China and across the United States and, just all over the place. So that's kind of my big journey, Otis. Thanks for asking. I haven't told that story in a long time.
Yeah. It's important because I'm also interested to learn, the Olympic thing. Because it's so much different than a business. And in particular, your reference to Rio de Janeiro, this weird government / nonprofit / business or group of folks who want to convince this other weird group of folks to allow them to host an event. That's a weird situation.
Well, let's recognize that it's not just hosting an event. It's a construction project.
Yes, because of all the buildup before too.
It is absolutely about developing a city. It's a municipal project. It's not a games.
Yeah. So is that the approach then more? It's more of a putting together a proposal to build things than it is we're nice people and we make great hot dogs here.
100%.
That's an interesting change.
Yeah, people need to understand, think about what goes into hosting a games. You need to guarantee, and look, things may have changed. So for folks who are listening who are Olympians or in the Olympic world or in the Olympic movement, I recognize that things have changed a lot, but you have to guarantee travel times between the venues and the hotels where people are staying. That means you have to change bus routes, build new roads. I mean, in the Rio bid, we were this has been a long time, but there was a proposal to say we need to get out to the shooting range and back to the main games family hotels. We're going to build a highway that does that for the games.
Oh my gosh.
So understand that these are municipal projects. They're not at games. Now, over time, I understand that it used to be everything was built from scratch, but that left what were called white elephants in big cities where venues that never got booked again. So there's a big drive to do a lot of collapsible venues that make it possible for them to stand up those games and then break them down without having huge disruption or building something so huge and new. But it is exactly what we do in business all the time. You're bringing together a disparate set of possible collaborators. You're building coalitions around a single vision together, and then you're planning out how you'll execute together, and you're doing a lot of storytelling to convince one another what to say yes to and what to say no to, and then you go.
The storytelling piece is actually what I wanted to ask about there, because as much, Dad, as your question was kind of, is it this or that? Clearly, of course, that there's both elements there. Could you talk some about how to build the story on top of that framework? Because I think that's where a lot of people might want to start with a story, and they might want to tell the story. Look how nice we are, all those kind of things. But then in reality, it's like if the foundation doesn't make sense, then the story doesn't matter at all. You can tell a really great story, but if the numbers don't add up, then numbers don't add up. You can't really change that. Could you talk some about that, getting to that storytelling component there?
I mean, look, y'all need to know what it is you're selling. And then you need to understand, do I have a business case that explains why this is the right thing to sell? And then you'll ask yourself, what stories might I tell to help bring that to life? So it always starts with the brass tacks, not the other way around. Otherwise, you're inventing stories that are basically solutions, and then you look for a problem. And that's a great way to waste a lot of people's time. So, this is even a funny turn of phrase in and around the tech space that is it actually a solution, or is it a problem, or, is it a solution to a real problem, or is it a solution looking for a problem? Mm-hmm. We don't want to invest in a fancy sounding solution that doesn't really have a clear problem. So you have to start with what is it that you're trying to make happen? And then what components of the reason that this thing needs to exist needs to be present in the story? And then what is the way in which we can bring those to life with the story that we tell? I gave you a framework already, but here's another one. You want another one?
Oh, yeah.
So let's imagine, we were chatting about a construction company earlier. Let's imagine that you run a mid-market construction company, and you're proposing a very large project that is not just like an open public RFP where it's like, how much does it cost, and whoever's the cheapest gets it. You got to tell a story. Well, we want to start with this one I call the blocker buster. Okay, the blocker buster. So if you understand what you can build, how much resources it's going to take, you can do a takeoff for all the costs, and you can back it up despite what's happening in the market. You know that if we build it in 6 months, the costs are going to be fixed. You can understand what the economic outcome will be of building the thing that you want to build. Maybe you're a developer. I don't know. Maybe that's a better example. You can make a case. You could show the numbers for what kind of economic activity it might create to build that new mixed use, 80 unit building. I don't know. I just changed business cases, but you get my point. You got to have the numbers. You got to have you got to have the brass tacks. Then you can use the blocker buster, which goes like this. I use this a lot also. I work with a lot of SaaS companies, and we use it in launching new SaaS products. What does your customer or client or audience want? I mean, in the case of the Olympic example, what does the IOC want? IOC is the International Olympic Committee. What do they want? They want a well-run games that's not destructive to the environment, that looks great in media, that's easy for people to want to attend and attend again. They want to build the brand. They want, so when you're that developer and you want to talk to somebody about here's what we want to build, you got to know, what do they want? They want a more thriving community. They want a more walkable space to live. They want to boost the local economic activity. They want to make it possible for them to fund a new school. I don't know what it is. What do they want? And it can be very pragmatic, but it can also be about, they want to be seen as an avant-garde model city, across the East. I don't know. Is it the feeling and also the pragmatics? What do they want? Secondly, what's blocking them from getting what they want? What's blocking them from getting what they want? And you need to be able to talk about the vibes and the hard numbers. What's blocking them is, lack of municipal transparency to help them understand what the permitting process might be. But you can solve that. But we're not talking about that yet. It might be, I know I'm mixing a lot of metaphors here, but it might be that, what's blocking them is, the lack of political will, or I don't know what it is, but what's blocking them, not stopping them individually, the assumption that it's riskier than it actually is, a lack of financing, I don't know, lack of data. What's blocking them? That's the second piece of your story. And then the third piece of your story is, what is it that you do that removes those blockers? And that can be about vibes. That can be like what it's like to work with you and what collaboration looks like and, how you partner and what are the operating principles you use as a developer in your space. But then it can also be that brass tacks, the services that you offer. Here's how we remove the permitting blockers. Here's how we deal with financing. Here's how, like, whatever it is. But you're going to link it really closely to how what it is that you do removes the blockers that they have so they can get more of what they want. And you're doing callbacks to that all the time. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth component is, and because of that, and then you make your ask.
Love that formula. Do you have a question there, Dad? Go ahead.
No.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I had a question.
Yeah.
No, so
guys, this might end up into a two-parter. I don't know what's happening. I hope everyone's staying with us.
What I'm curious about, Dia, talking about communication and something that you're very passionate about. It's always interesting to me because we have people who work in these fields for a long time, whether it's leadership, talking about culture, like we did before the show, all these different things where it's like this is a problem, people want to go solve it, right? We want to make people better communicators. We want to help them be more effective communicators. What have you seen as that problem changes over your time in this business? Because these things don't happen in a vacuum. We talk about culture and the importance of that. We could be talking about this for, Dad, we've been talking about it for 5 years. People heard it. There's people changing. The change is happening. What would you say is the status of that change when it comes to communication quality?
It hasn't. I mean, the short answer is it hasn't.
Yeah.
The context has changed and the culture around it has changed depending on what industry you're in. If you're in New York in finance, it's a very different, a very different culture of communication in that business versus Silicon Valley culture versus, the construction culture we're talking about versus environmental technologies versus like what industry are you in? Like, let's notice that. Secondly, let's also recognize that the channels that we have for communicating have gone completely nuts. We have verbal communication, we have formal presentations, we have Slack channels, we have WhatsApp, we have, Microsoft Teams, we have video calls, we have audio calls, we have asynchronous work, we have hybrid work, we have so the context has changed. So you have to really recognize where am I? What is the context in which I'm communicating now and what's appropriate there? Because what works one place is not going to work somewhere else necessarily. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna present a particular idea to you. Is going to take 20 minutes, but I can't write that same narrative and drop it into a Slack group and expect everyone to read 20 minutes worth of me talking. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Right. So recognizing context matters, recognizing culture matters, but it's no different that people look for two things when they go to develop their communication. I'm going to call them skills because they think they just are looking for skills. They want to know where to put the hands, how to do a good dramatic pause, how to be more confident. They look for very skills-based things, which is different than leadership voice. Mm. Now that's something that's changed for me. I started in the world of skills and I realized skills are one thing. What's another thing is what is it that you have to say? Mm-hmm. Who cares where you put your hands if I don't even know what is your point of view in the world? Mm. So I've separated those in my practice significantly. I love this quote from Miles Davis. It's somebody's going to come at me. I hope I'm quoting it right. It says something
we paraphrase quotes here.
Okay, great. Something like, it takes a lifetime to sound like yourself. Because the difference between a skillful trumpet player and Miles Davis is Miles Davis, not whether he can do scales on the trumpet excellently. Do you hear the difference? And the difference between being a skillful communicator in a pitch or on a stage, being able to execute a good dramatic pause, where to put your hands, knowing how to write, ask a powerful question. The difference between that and having a real leadership voice is you. So what's changed for me and my work is recognizing that I'm operating in those two planes all the time. They're not the same.
No, I love that. That's the difference is you. We talk about that so much in leadership, and leadership starts with yourself and leading yourself. And one of the things that I like to lead myself towards is what did I learn? And truthfully, I'm still fascinated. I feel like I need to call you up and we can talk about the auction space, because I'm just fascinated by that whole art that it really becomes, and the fact that even in the auction space where it seems like it's get the next thing, get the next thing, get the next thing, you're still establishing a relationship with your audience, and I think that's, for me, that is what I learned today, is to think about that in a different sense. So Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I got a bonus one because I got a quick one here. We were talking about mics beforehand and walls and whatnot. Our bathroom is right there. My daughter is taking a nice bath, and apparently that all comes through this wall. So good to know. I will be buying that microphone, Dia, because if you guys saw me hitting the mute button while we were going, that's what was happening. Clementine having a little bath. That's all right.
That she has found her voice. We'll just say
yes,
that.
She has. Yes, she has. But the other thing, and actually in the auction space also, it's one of those things I kind of always assumed, and I never asked anybody, but that the pace of the auctioneer isn't like a mechanism for information asymmetry. It's not like ooh, I gotcha. It is more so just how it's done. And I thought that was really interesting what you were talking about there, Dia, with that, because I always assumed it was a little bit of a gotcha type thing, and you opened my eyes on that. So thanks.
Yeah, Dia, how about you? What'd you learn?
Oh, every time I just this last year, and I'm sure folks listening have faced this in their careers. Like, I've been in a little bit of a burnout zone. I've been feeling that. It happens for me about every 7.5 years. And actually, it was the reason that I went to auctioneering school 10 years ago, because I put myself on a sabbatical, and I just went because I wanted to learn something weird and fun. And I had been the auctioneer for my children's preschool fundraiser 10 years even before that. And so I put it on the list. Like, I'd actually learn how to do that for fun. And I'm like 7 or 8 years, from the end of that one. And I'm recognized I've been a little bit burned out. And what I learned today is, like, I just still love this work.
That's awesome. I love that reaffirmation. Dia, how do folks find you, learn more about what y'all got going on and what's happening next?
Sure. So the best place to find me on social is on LinkedIn. I'm not super active, but I am there, and that's where my professional community lies. I'm much more of a B2B take, and so that's the best place to find me. You can also find me at diabondi.com. And for folks thinking about being a real clutch communicator, I do run something called the Transformational Voice Intensive 3 times a year. And it is a 2.25 day retreat style intensive where you walk in going, what is my leadership voice? And you walk out with an answer. So I invite folks to check that out on my website, and to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or, you want to get to know me.
Awesome. Dia, this has been a lot of fun. We really appreciate your time today.
So much fun.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Dia Bondi, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive episode available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.